"I won't charge you," said the poor blacksmith to a traveler, and Jesus Christ changed his life. The hammer fell again, sharp and unforgiving, striking the anvil with a sound that echoed through the small blacksmith shop on the edge of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Sparks burst into the dim air like brief flashes of lightning, then vanished just as quickly. Outside, night pressed against the windows. Inside, pain pressed harder. Ethan Brooks stood over the anvil, his shoulders rigid, his jaw clenched so tightly the muscles in his face trembled. Every swing of the hammer sent a white-hot jolt through his lower back pain, shooting up his spine and settling behind his eyes. It was the kind of pain that demanded surrender, but surrender was not an option tonight. From another corner of the shop, Noah sat on a wooden crate, his eyes unfocused, his hands resting motionless on his knees. The medicine kept him quiet, kept the chaos in his mind at bay, but only just. At home, Lily waited in her wheelchair, her legs wrapped carefully to prevent the spasms that came when therapy was missed. Ethan knew the clock was ticking for both of them. The wall clock read 7:52 p.m. One more job. That was all Ethan told himself. One more piece of iron, one more small payment, and maybe there would be enough for Noah's prescription tomorrow. Maybe Lily wouldn't have to miss another therapy session. The math never worked out cleanly, but Ethan kept trying anyway. The forge glowed orange as the iron heated, breathing like a living thing. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow with a soot-stained sleeve and lifted the hammer again. The pain surged. His knees buckled for half a second, just long enough for fear to slip in. What if his back finally gave out tonight? What if he collapsed right here with no one to finish the work, no one to pay the bills, no one to hold the family together? Then through the rhythm of hammer on steel, another sound cut through the shop. Hoof steps, slow, uneven, stone against iron shoes. Ethan froze, the hammer hovering in midair. Outside, under the yellow glow of a single street lamp, a horse stood just beyond the open door. One front hoof was bare, worn down, vulnerable. Beside the animal stood a man, travel-worn, his jacket dusty, his face drawn tight with worry. He did not look dangerous. He did not look important. He looked desperate. The clock ticked louder in the silence. Ethan lowered the hammer, his back screaming as he straightened. He had no way of knowing that this interruption, this ordinary, inconvenient request at the worst possible hour, was about to divide his life into two parts, before this night, and everything that would come after. Ethan Brooks had been born into the sound of iron meeting iron. Long before the pain, before the sleepless nights and the quiet grief, there had been rhythm steady, inherited, unbroken. His grandfather's hammer once rang inside these same walls, shaping hinges for Amish barns and gatework for farms that stretched to the horizon. His father followed, teaching Ethan that iron remembered the hands that shaped it, that craftsmanship was a form of honesty. You did the work right or you didn't do it at all. For decades, that belief had carried Ethan. Customers came because they trusted him. Ranchers, farmers, homeowners, restoring old properties, people who valued things that lasted. The shop itself was modest, almost forgotten by the modern world, but it held a reputation built slowly, patiently, one finished piece at a time. What it no longer held was Ethan's strength. By his early 50s, exhaustion had seeped into his bones. The injury came quietly years ago, lifting a heavy steel block alone when help didn't arrive, a sharp snap in his lower back that never fully healed. Doctors had names for it and scans to prove it, but solutions required time and money Ethan never had. Rest was a luxury. Surgery was a dream. Pain became routine. Neighbors saw a man who still showed up before sunrise, who kept the forge lit through winter storms and summer heat waves. They didn't see the mornings when Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, breathing through tears because standing upright felt impossible. They didn't hear the low groan he swallowed each time he bent to pick up a tool. In the shop, he hit it well. Pain like iron could be tempered into silence. The legacy mattered to him, not because of pride, but because it was the last thing that still connected the past to the present. If the shop closed, it wouldn't just be a business ending, it would be the final chapter of a family story that had survived wars, depressions, and generations of hard labor. Ethan carried that weight every time he unlocked the door, but tradition didn't pay for prescriptions. It didn't cover therapy sessions or groceries or heating oil when winter bit hard. By nightfall, fatigue hollowed him out. His hands shook when he tried to grip a mug of coffee. His vision blurred when he focused too long on the glowing steel. Still he worked. Those who knew him best noticed the change. The local feed supplier saw how Ethan leaned on the counter longer than necessary. A regular customer watched him straighten up more slowly after each job, as if gravity itself had grown crueler. No one said anything. In places like this, endurance was respected more than confession. Ethan never complained. He believed complaining wasted breath, better used to keep going. What he didn't realize was how close he was to the edge, how thin the line had become between perseverance and collapse. Each job took more from him than the last, and each night left him emptier. Yet the forge still burned. The anvil still stood. And Ethan Brooks, heir to a craft older than convenience, kept swinging the hammer, not because he was strong anymore, but because stopping felt more dangerous than the pain itself. Sarah Brooks used to stand at the doorway of the blacksmith shop just before dusk, wiping her hands on a dish towel, waiting for the sound of the forge to quiet. She always knew when Ethan was close to finishing for the day. His hammer had a rhythm she recognized, steady, careful, never rushed. When it stopped, she would smile, already planning dinner in her head. That rhythm ended the year Sarah got sick. At first it was small things, fatigue that didn't make sense, bruises that lingered too long. Then came the tests, the hushed conversations in sterile hospital hallways, the word leukemia spoken softly as if volume could soften its meaning. Ethan sat through every appointment, gripping Sarah's hand while doctors talked about treatment plans, percentages, and hope measured in numbers. They fought. They spent everything. Savings disappeared. Credit cards followed. Ethan sold tools his father had given him, telling himself he could always buy replacements later. What mattered was time. Just a little more time. Time never came. Sarah died on a quiet morning, sunlight spilling through a hospital window that felt cruelly beautiful. Ethan stood there as machines went silent, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes could see. He had prayed the night before, prayed harder than he ever had in his life. He begged, he promised. He asked God for anything except this. There was no answer he could hear. The house changed after that. Sarah's mug stayed where she left it, untouched. Her coat hung by the door long after winter ended. At night, the silence pressed in from every wall. Ethan slept on the edge of the bed as if leaving space might somehow keep her close. Noah felt her absence first. His moods darkened, his words tangled, the fragile balance in his mind beginning to crack. Lily asked for her mother in quiet moments, her voice small, careful not to hurt her father. Ethan learned how to braid hair with shaking hands, how to manage medications, how to smile when his children needed reassurance he didn't feel. Faith used to be simple in that house. Sunday mornings, grace before meals, a Bible on the nightstand. After Sarah's funeral, those rituals felt hollow. Ethan still bowed his head, but the words stuck in his throat. What kind of God watched a family do everything right and still let this happen? Some nights Ethan sat alone at the kitchen table long after the children slept, staring at the worn wooden surface where Sarah once rested her hands. He tried to pray. He really did. But every prayer turned into the same unanswered question. Why her? Why us? The cross on the wall became decoration instead of comfort. The Bible gathered dust. Faith didn't disappear. All at once, it thinned, faded, became something fragile and distant. Ethan didn't reject God outright. He simply stopped expecting anything in return. To the outside world, the Brooks family kept going. Bills were paid late, but paid. The children were fed. The forge stayed open. But inside the house, something essential had broken. Love remained, responsibility remained, but hope felt like a memory from another life. And Ethan Brooks carried that loss quietly, believing that grief was simply another burden a man was meant to bear alone, never imagining that the God he thought had gone silent was watching far more closely than he knew. After Sarah's death, the weight of the house did not lessen. It multiplied. Noah was the first to slip. He had always been quiet, thoughtful in a way that made teachers describe him as deep. Grief, however, twisted that depth into something darker. He stopped sleeping. He began talking to corners of the room as if someone were standing there. At first, Ethan told himself it was just mourning a young man trying to process loss. Then the voices arrived. Noah said they whispered at night, then argued during the day, then shouted until his head felt like it would split open. He accused shadows of following him, believed strangers were watching through the windows. When the diagnosis came schizoaffective disorder severe, Ethan felt the floor drop beneath him. Medication helped, but only barely. Without it, Noah spiraled into fear and confusion, capable of hurting himself without understanding why. Every morning, Ethan counted pills at the kitchen table, checking the bottle twice, then a third time, terrified of making a mistake. The medicine dulled Noah's eyes, slowed his movements, but it kept him tethered to reality. On bad days, Noah sat in the corner of the shop, staring at the sparks from the forge, silent and distant, as if half of him lived somewhere Ethan could never reach. Lily's burden was quieter but no less heavy. She had never known a world without the wheelchair. Cerebral palsy shaped her body from birth, her muscles tight and uncooperative, her legs refusing commands her mind issued with perfect clarity. Lily's intelligence shone in ways that made strangers forget her disability until they noticed how carefully she moved, how every shift required effort. Therapy was her lifeline. Missed too many sessions and her muscles stiffened painfully, pulling her joints into positions that stole what little comfort she had. The therapist spoke in clinical terms, range of motion prevention of contractures, but Ethan heard it differently: skip therapy, and his daughter would suffer more than she already did. Some nights, Lily asked questions that cut deeper than any diagnosis. "Did Mom ever feel like this?" she asked once, tracing circles on the arm of her wheelchair. Ethan swallowed hard before answering, choosing words that would not crush her hope. Lily smiled often, but it was the kind of smile that came from courage, not ease. Ethan became everything at once: father, caregiver, nurse, scheduler, advocate. He learned medical terms he never wanted to know. He memorized appointment times, refill dates, insurance codes. He slept with one ear open, listening for Noah's restless movements, for Lily calling his name. The money never stretched far enough. Prescriptions drained one pocket. Therapy drained the other. There was always something else: a broken wheelchair part, an unexpected fee, a specialist who didn't take their insurance. Ethan learned to live with constant calculation, measuring every decision against his children's needs. Love kept him upright when his body begged to fold, but love also made the fear sharper. What would happen to Noah if the medication ran out? What would happen to Lily if therapy stopped? And what would happen to both of them if Ethan's failing back finally forced him to quit? The burden was double, relentless, and deeply personal. Yet each morning Ethan rose, steadying himself against the wall, because two lives depended on a man who no longer believed he was strong enough, but who refused, absolutely refused, to let them fall. Numbers became the quiet enemy in Ethan Brooks's life. They did not shout or threaten. They simply waited on envelopes slid under the door, on pharmacy receipts folded into his wallet, on reminders that flashed across his phone like silent alarms. Noah's medication came first. Without it, the voices returned sharp and relentless. With it, Noah stayed grounded, present enough to sit through a meal, calm enough to sleep. The bottle lasted 30 days. The cost arrived like clockwork. Each refill meant another decision about what could be postponed, what could be sacrificed. There was no margin for error. Missing even a week was not an option Ethan allowed himself to consider. Lily's therapy followed closely behind. 2 sessions a week, sometimes 3 when her muscles tightened too much. The therapist's office was bright and encouraging, filled with charts and progress notes, but the invoices told a colder story. Insurance covered part of it. The rest fell squarely on Ethan's shoulders. Skip sessions and Lily's pain increased. Missed too many, and the progress she fought for slipped backward. Then there was the shop. The blacksmith shop wasn't just where Ethan worked. It was the engine that kept everything else alive. The rent came due every month, whether business was good or slow. Electricity to keep the forge running. Fuel. Replacement tools when old ones finally gave out. Each expense stacked on top of the last, forming a wall that felt impossible to climb. At night, Ethan spread the bills across the kitchen table, the same table where Sarah once helped the kids with homework. He lined them up carefully, as if order might somehow change the totals printed at the bottom. Pharmacy, therapy, rent, utilities, groceries. There was a rhythm to it, a pattern he knew by heart, and every month the numbers came close, but never close enough. The math always ended the same way. 0 left over, no savings, no cushion, nothing for emergencies. Nothing for his own doctor visits, let alone the surgery specialists kept recommending for his back. Pain Ethan decided was cheaper than time off. Some weeks customers paid late. Others asked for discounts, assuming a small shop could be flexible. Ethan nodded, smiled, and agreed more often than he should have. Turning people away felt wrong. The forge had always been a place of help, of honest work done fairly. He couldn't bring himself to harden it into something else. But generosity had a cost. The feed store owner noticed Ethan hesitating before buying supplies. The pharmacist recognized him now, greeting him by name, sometimes offering quiet sympathy when insurance delays pushed payments into uncomfortable conversations. The landlord sent polite reminders, then firmer ones. Ethan carried those pressures silently. He did not complain to Noah, who already carried enough confusion. He did not burden Lily, who measured her days in small victories and pain-free moments. Instead, he absorbed it all, letting the weight settle deep in his chest. Some nights after the children slept, Ethan sat alone in the shop, the forge dark, the air cold. He counted again. He counted because counting made him feel responsible even when the totals refused to obey him. He told himself that as long as the numbers could still be written down, the situation was manageable. But beneath the calculations lived a quieter fear. One missed payment, one unexpected expense, one injury that forced him to stop working even briefly. Any of those could unravel everything. And so Ethan Brooks kept going, swinging the hammer, opening the shop, paying what he could, trapped between numbers that tightened like a vice, unaware that the smallest decision worth less than the cost of a single prescription was about to break that grip forever. The interruption came at the worst possible moment. Ethan had just finished tempering a piece of iron, his hands trembling as he lowered it into the water, when the sound returned, hoofsteps on gravel, closer now, unmistakable. He straightened slowly, bracing a hand against the workbench, until the pain in his back settled into something manageable. Outside the open shop door, the night air carried the sharp scent of earth and cold metal. The horse stood unevenly beneath the single streetlight, shifting its weight with visible discomfort. One front hoof was bare, the iron shoe gone, the edge of the hoof chipped and vulnerable. Beside the animal stood the man Ethan had noticed earlier. Mid-40s travel, worn his jacket dusty, his boots scuffed from miles on the road. He held the reins loosely, but his face was tight with urgency. "Sir," the man said, careful and respectful, as if he already sensed how thin the night had worn its welcome. "Are you the blacksmith?" Ethan nodded once. "What's wrong? I lost a shoe a few miles back," the man said, glancing down at the hoof. "Didn't notice right away. The road's rough out there. I'm headed east another 30 miles. I can't make it like this." Ethan crouched with difficulty, examining the hoof by the forge's fading light. The damage wasn't catastrophic yet, but it would be if the horse kept moving. He could already see the work in his mind, forging a new shoe from scratch, shaping it precisely, fitting it cleanly. It would take time, at least 2 hours, maybe more. The man swallowed hard, then spoke again, faster now. "I wouldn't ask this late if it wasn't urgent. My wife, she's sick. I need to get her to the hospital tonight. I was supposed to pick her up in the next town." There it was, the word that changed the air between them. Sick. Ethan felt it land like a weight on his chest. He stood slowly, brushing soot from his hands. "I can do it," he said, "but it'll take a while." Relief flashed across the man's face, then vanished just as quickly. He reached into his jacket pocket, then another. He checked his back pocket, his saddlebag, even the lining of his coat. His movements grew frantic, then helpless. "I don't have my wallet," he said quietly. "I was robbed earlier. Took everything. Cash, phone. I didn't even realize the shoe was gone until I tried to push on." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft snort of the horse and the ticking of the clock inside the shop. Ethan's mind raced, already calculating the cost of the job, the money it would bring, the prescription due in the morning, the therapy bill waiting at the end of the week. "I'll come back," the man added quickly, meeting Ethan's eyes. "Tomorrow, I swear. I'll pay you double. I just—" His voice broke just slightly. "I just need to get to her." Ethan looked past him down the empty road, disappearing into darkness. He saw the man's fear clearly, now the kind that didn't perform, didn't exaggerate. It was the fear of being too late. Inside the shop, the forge crackled softly, its glow fading as fuel burned low. 2 hours of work would mean reopening it. More pain, more strain, but it would also mean finishing the night with nothing to show for it financially. The decision pressed in from all sides. Ethan glanced back at the horse, then at the man, and finally at the darkened road. He had no way of knowing that this moment, this simple request, without money, without guarantees, was not an inconvenience but an invitation. One that would ask him to choose between what he desperately needed and what someone else could not afford to lose. And whatever choice he made next would echo far beyond this quiet Pennsylvania road. The silence that followed felt heavier than the forge itself. Ethan stood between the man and the anvil, his hands still dark with soot, his back throbbing in steady waves. 2 hours of work. He knew exactly what that meant. 2 hours bent over hot iron. 2 hours of pain sharp enough to steal his breath. 2 hours that usually translated into a small but essential payment, just enough to keep tomorrow from collapsing. His eyes drifted unwillingly to the clock on the wall. 2 hours was Noah's medication, the refill due in the morning. Without it, the voices would return first as whispers, then as commands. 2 hours was groceries for the week. Something more than canned soup. Something warm. Something normal. 2 hours was Lily's next therapy session, the one the therapist had insisted not be skipped again. The traveler waited motionless, as if sensing the storm raging behind Ethan's eyes. He didn't plead. He didn't bargain anymore. He simply held the reins and watched the bare hoof sink slightly into the gravel. Each shift of weight a reminder that time was not on anyone's side. Ethan swallowed and did the math one more time, even though the numbers were burned into him. If he worked and didn't get paid, there would be consequences, real ones, immediate ones. Noah's bottle would sit empty. Lily's appointment would be canceled with an apologetic call. The house would grow quieter, heavier. And yet another image forced its way forward. A hospital hallway, white walls, the smell of disinfectant, a doctor lowering his voice. Ethan remembered standing exactly like this once, waiting, hoping, bargaining with time itself. He remembered what it felt like to arrive too late to be told there was nothing more to do. The traveler shifted, clearing his throat. "I understand if you can't," he said softly. "I know it's late. I know this is asking a lot." That made it worse. Ethan turned away, pressing his palm against the workbench until the wood bit into his skin. His chest tightened. The shop that had always been a place of answers offered none tonight. There was no clean solution, no choice that didn't hurt someone. From the corner of the shop, Noah stirred. He had been quiet unusually, so watching the scene with unfocused eyes. Now he spoke, his voice flat but clear. "Dad, are we leaving?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He couldn't. If he spoke, the truth might come out jagged and frightening. Lily's face rose in his mind next, not crying, not demanding, just smiling, that careful smile she used when she didn't want to be a burden. Ethan felt something inside him twist painfully. He had promised himself he would never fail them. Not again. Not after everything they had already lost. But another promise, older, quieter, pressed against his heart. The one he used to believe in before grief hollowed it out. The idea that doing the right thing mattered even when it cost something. Especially when it cost something. Ethan turned back to the traveler. Up close, the man looked exhausted, not just from the road, but from fear. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted the reins. Somewhere not far away, a woman waited, unaware of how close help was or how easily it could slip away. The clock ticked again. 2 hours of labor, 2 hours of pain, 2 hours that could decide who would suffer tonight. Ethan closed his eyes, drawing in a breath that felt heavier than iron. He stood at the center of a choice no one should have to make, knowing that whatever he decided next would reveal more about him than years of hard work ever had. And the night waited, holding its breath for his answer. Ethan felt the decision settle before he fully understood it. He opened his eyes and looked at the traveler again, not at the worn jacket or the empty hands, but at the fear he recognized too well. It was the same fear Ethan had carried down the hospital corridors years ago, the kind that made every minute feel like a verdict. "I won't charge you." The words left his mouth quietly, almost without weight, yet they landed between them like a stone dropped into still water. The traveler froze. "Sir, I'll come back," he said quickly. "Tomorrow, I promise. I'll pay whatever you ask." Ethan shook his head once. You need to get there tonight. His voice tightened, but he didn't let it break. Tomorrow might be too late. For a moment, neither man spoke. The horse snorted softly, shifting its injured hoof. Inside the shop, the forge hissed as a coal collapsed, sending a brief flare of light across the walls. Noah watched from his corner eyes, distant but attentive, as if something important had just crossed an invisible line. The traveler's face changed confusion, giving way to disbelief, then to something like awe. "Why would you do this?" he asked. "You don't even know me." Ethan turned toward the anvil, gripping its cold edge to steady himself. His back protested instantly, pain blooming sharp and unforgiving. He welcomed it. Pain at least was familiar. "I know what it's like to be late," Ethan said, not turning around. "And I know what it costs." He didn't explain further. He didn't mention the medicine due in the morning or the therapy appointment that might be missed. He didn't talk about the bills spread across his kitchen table or the way his body threatened to fail him every day. Some truths didn't need witnesses. He reached for a steel bar and slid it into the forge. The orange glow returned brighter, now alive. Heat rolled through the shop, thick and heavy. Ethan set his stance carefully, every movement measured to protect a back that no longer forgave mistakes. The traveler swallowed hard. "May God repay you," he whispered, unsure if it was a blessing or a plea. Ethan didn't answer. He lifted the hammer. The first strike sent a jolt of pain so fierce his vision narrowed. He breathed through it, then struck again, and again. The rhythm returned slower than before, but deliberate, resolute. Each blow bent the metal and drove the decision deeper, sealing it in iron. From the corner, Noah shifted his gaze, fixed on the sparks. His lips moved, forming words barely louder than breath. "It's quieter," he said as if surprised. "The noise, it's quieter." Ethan's hands trembled, but he didn't stop. He couldn't afford to think about what he had given up. He could only focus on what he was giving to. The traveler sat on the wooden bench, silent now, watching a man work through agony without complaint. The air felt different, thicker, expectant, though nothing visible had changed. The shop remained small, the tools worn the night cold. Yet something irreversible had happened. With 3 words, Ethan Brooks had crossed a line that could not be undone. He had chosen loss so that someone else might reach hope in time. And in that choice, made without witnesses, without guarantees, he had unknowingly stepped into a story far larger than his own. The work began the moment the iron reached its color. Ethan watched the steel turn from dull gray to a deep glowing orange, the exact shade his father had taught him to wait for. Too soon, and the metal would crack. Too late, and it would lose its strength. Tonight he needed it perfect. There would be no second attempt. He lifted the bar from the forge and laid it across the anvil. The first strike landed clean, and pain exploded through his lower back, sharp enough to steal the air from his lungs. His knees buckled slightly. He locked them in place and struck again. Each blow became an act of will. Bang! Fire burst. Bang! His spine screamed. Bang! The metal bent slowly, surrendering to the shape he demanded. Sweat rolled down his temples, despite the cool night air. His jaw clenched until his teeth ached. The traveler sat silently on the bench, hands folded, watching with an expression that shifted from gratitude to something deeper, something like reverence. He had seen labor before, but not this kind. Not work done at such visible cost. Ethan's movements grew smaller, more economical. He adjusted his stance, keeping his weight balanced to spare his back, though it made the work harder. Every adjustment sent another wave of pain through him. He welcomed none of it. He simply endured. Time slowed. The clock ticked, but the minutes stretched and blurred together. Ethan reheated the iron, then struck again, shaping the curve with careful precision. This was no rushed job. A horse's hoof demanded accuracy. Anything less would fail on the road, and failure was not an option tonight. From the corner of the shop, Noah watched the sparks rise and fall. His eyes followed them with unusual focus. The usual tension in his shoulders seemed to ease just slightly. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, as if listening to something only he could hear. "Dad," he said suddenly. Ethan didn't stop swinging. "Yeah," Noah hesitated, searching for words. "You're doing something good." His voice was flat, uncertain, but the conviction beneath it was unmistakable. The noise. It stopped yelling. The hammer paused midair. Ethan's chest tightened. He turned just enough to look at his son. Noah's eyes were clearer than they had been all day, less clouded, as if a window had opened somewhere deep inside his mind. "That's good," Ethan said quietly, then turned back to the anvil. He didn't trust himself to say more. He plunged the iron back into the forge. The hiss of heat filled the shop, thick and alive. Ethan leaned on the edge of the anvil for a heartbeat longer than necessary, breathing through a surge of pain that made his vision darken at the edges. When he lifted the iron again, his hands shook. Bang! The sound echoed off the walls, deeper now, steadier. Bang! The curve took shape. Bang! Holes were punched with measured force. Each strike was deliberate, careful, as if the work itself demanded reverence. Ethan was no longer thinking about money, or bills, or tomorrow morning. The pain narrowed his world to this single task, this single offering. Every ounce of strength he had left went into the steel. The traveler stood now, drawn closer without realizing it. He said nothing. The air around the forge felt heavy charged, as if something unseen had stepped into the room. At last the shoe lay complete, formed, balanced, true. Ethan lowered the hammer, his arms trembling. His back burned with a pain so intense it bordered on numbness. He bent forward slightly, one hand gripping the anvil to keep from collapsing. But in that moment, sweat-soaked shaking spent, there was a strange stillness in the shop. Not silence, but peace. And no one there understood yet that this suffering offered without complaint had already been received. The moment did not arrive with thunder. It came quietly in the space between breaths. Ethan was still bent over the anvil, one hand braced against the cold steel when the traveler stepped closer. The firelight flickered across the man's face, and for the first time Ethan noticed how calm he was, too calm for someone who had been desperate only minutes earlier. The urgency, the fear had vanished, replaced by something steady and unshakable. Ethan. The sound of his name landed like a blow. Ethan straightened slowly, his heart pounding harder than his injured back ever had. He had never given his name. Not once. The shop was too small, too isolated for coincidence to feel reasonable. Noah lifted his head sharply from the corner, his eyes fixed on the traveler, as if recognizing something long forgotten. "How do you know my name?" Ethan asked. His voice was rough, stripped bare by pain and fatigue. The traveler met his gaze, and the firelight did something impossible. It didn't just reflect in his eyes, it seemed to come from within them. Not blinding, not dramatic, just deep, warm, and unmistakably alive. "You've carried more than iron," the man said gently. "You've carried grief. You've carried fear. You've carried your children when your own body could barely stand." Ethan's breath caught. Memories surged without permission. Hospital hallways, unpaid bills, nights spent awake listening for Noah's footsteps, mornings lifting Lily from her bed with shaking arms. Things he had never spoken aloud, things no stranger could know. The traveler took one more step forward. The air in the shop felt thicker now, as if the world itself had leaned in to listen. "You forge crosses for others," the man continued, his voice steady, resonant. "You kept faith alive with your hands long after your heart believed it was gone. And tonight you gave what you did not have." Ethan's knees weakened. He gripped the anvil again, not trusting his body to hold him. "Who are you?" he whispered. The traveler smiled, not with triumph, but with compassion so deep it hurt to look at. In that smile was every kindness Ethan had ever hoped for and stopped expecting. "I am the one you served when you chose mercy," the man said. "I am the one who stood with you when you buried your wife and thought you were alone. I am the one who holds Noah when his mind fractures and who sits beside Lily when pain steals her rest." Noah gasped softly, his eyes wide, lucid in a way Ethan had not seen in years. The noise inside his head, the chaos that never fully left, fell away, replaced by a clarity that felt like waking up. Ethan sank to his knees. The pain in his back vanished from his awareness, replaced by something far greater, a fear that was not terror but awe, reverence, recognition. "Jesus Christ, Ethan," breathed the name rising from somewhere deeper than memory. The traveler nodded, and in that simple gesture, heaven felt impossibly close to a soot-stained blacksmith shop on a forgotten Pennsylvania road. "I came as you invited me," Jesus Christ said softly. "When you chose love over survival, when you gave without asking to be repaid." The forge crackled behind them, but the sound felt distant, now unimportant. Ethan bowed his head, tears spilling freely onto the floor he had swept 1,000 times before. Years of unanswered prayers, of quiet anger, of exhausted faith poured out of him in silence. Jesus Christ stepped closer, and though he did not touch Ethan yet, warmth filled the space between them, gentle, living, unmistakable. "You are not unseen," he said. "Your suffering has not been wasted. And this night is not the end of your giving, it is the beginning of your restoration." Outside, the horse stood perfectly still. Inside, a broken man realized that the God he thought had abandoned him had been present all along, waiting for a moment of mercy to reveal himself at last. Jesus Christ did not rush. He knelt in front of Ethan as one would kneel before a wounded friend, not a servant before a king. The forge light dimmed, not because the fire had died, but because another warmth had filled the room, deeper, gentler, alive. "You have carried pain longer than anyone should," Jesus Christ said softly, "and you never asked why it was fair. You only asked how to endure." Ethan could not speak. Tears ran freely now, soaking the front of his shirt, dripping onto the blackened floor. His back throbbed, as it always had, constant burning familiar. Then Jesus Christ raised his hand. He did not touch Ethan's spine. His fingers hovered just above it, close enough for the air to tremble. A heat unlike the forge flowed through Ethan's body, not sharp, not consuming, but restorative, like sunlight reaching bone. The pain stopped, not slowly, not fading. It stopped as if someone had switched it off. Ethan gasped, sucking in air like a man pulled from deep water. His hands flew to his lower back. He twisted instinctively, once-twice movements that had brought agony for years. Nothing. No fire. No stabbing shock. No weakness. He stood, his legs held, his spine straightened. He bent, then knelt, then rose again, disbelief flooding his face. A sound escaped him, half sob, half laugh, as he realized the truth. "My back," he whispered. "It doesn't hurt." Jesus Christ smiled. "You forged iron with a broken body," he said. "Now your body will serve with joy." From the corner of the shop came a sharp breath. Noah was standing, not swaying, not distant, standing upright, his eyes focused in a way they had not been for years. He looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. "The noise," Noah said slowly. "It's gone." Ethan turned, his heart pounding harder than it ever had during pain. "What did you say?" Noah touched his own temple, confused but calm. "The voices. They're silent." His voice cracked. "Dad, I can think. It's quiet." Jesus Christ rose and faced Noah. "Your mind has been a battlefield," he said gently, "but your soul was never broken." Noah fell to his knees, not in fear, but in release, years of torment dissolving into stillness. And Lily, Ethan whispered, fear and hope colliding. "My daughter, she can't walk." Jesus Christ turned toward the doorway that led to the small house beside the shop where Lily slept unaware. His voice carried no doubt. "She will wake tomorrow changed," he said. "Her body will respond, slowly with effort, but surely, and she will walk." Ethan covered his mouth, unable to contain the sob that rose from his chest. "You gave when you had nothing," Jesus Christ continued. "You chose mercy over survival. Because of that, your children will not suffer as you feared." The shop stood silent. Iron cooled on the anvil. The horse outside waited patiently. Time itself seemed suspended. Ethan knelt between his sons and his Savior, no longer broken, no longer alone, knowing with absolute certainty that this was not coincidence, not imagination, not relief born of exhaustion. This was grace, and it had come not with spectacle, but with healing hands, faithful promises, and a love that had never left him even in the years he believed God had gone silent. Morning arrived gently, as if the world itself were careful not to disturb what had happened. Ethan did not sleep that night. He stood in the blacksmith shop until dawn, bending, stretching, lifting tools he had avoided for years, each movement free, effortless, painless. The forge was quiet, yet the room felt fuller than it ever had. Noah sat nearby, alert and present, asking simple questions, laughing softly at ordinary things. It felt like a home rediscovered. At 9 o'clock, sharp, Lily woke. She looked down at her legs, brow furrowing in confusion. Then her fingers brushed the blanket, and she gasped. "Dad," she whispered, "I can feel them." When she tried to move her toes, obeyed just barely but undeniably. By the time the sun reached the window, hope had become fact. Therapy would take time, effort, patience, but the future had reopened. Life did not turn into a fairy tale overnight. Doctors called it unexplained improvement. Specialists used careful language. Ethan let them. He knew the truth he had lived. Within weeks, something else arrived quietly without spectacle. A local supplier recommended Ethan's work to a regional manufacturer, restoring historic properties across the Northeast. Then came a contract, steady orders, fair pay, long-term stability. Enough to cover therapy, enough to keep Noah's care consistent, enough to rebuild the shop without debt. Ethan did not grow rich in the way headlines celebrate. He grew secure. He grew generous. Each year on the same date, when a traveler once arrived with an empty wallet and an urgent need, Ethan closed the ledger. No prices, no invoices. Just a sign on the door, "Free horseshoes today." Farmers came from miles away. Some paid in thanks, some paid in tears. Some could offer nothing at all and were welcomed anyway. Noah worked beside his father, steady and focused. Lily, stronger each month, greeted visitors with a smile that needed no explanation. No speeches were made, no plaques installed, only irons shaped, carefully, honestly given freely. Those who asked why were told simply there was a night when mercy mattered more than money, and the world changed because of it. Ethan never claimed special favor. He never promised miracles on demand. He only said this love given in secret is never wasted, and no act of mercy goes unseen. And somewhere between the ring of hammer on anvil and the quiet gratitude of those helped without cost, a legacy took root, not of profit, but of grace. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that faith can still walk quietly through ordinary lives, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Jesus Christ Encounters. Your support helps these stories reach hearts that may need hope today.